I'm going to talk about something real simple today. It's one of these things that has the power to really make you more productive. I probably talked about this when I first was exposed to the idea from John Maxwell. And so you can see my fancy Justin Murrell screen that he taught me how to use here. All right, so we're going to talk about what John Maxwell calls the rule of five. Okay, this talk is how to get more done. So the rule of five is a series of activities that you do every day that are fundamental to your success. So the concept here is if you do a little bit every day in 5 areas, you become unbelievably productive over a period of months. Okay. So the key is identifying the right 5 things and becoming disciplined enough to even spend 5 minutes a day doing those things. Okay, that's the bottom line of how to get more done. So let's look at Maxwell's rule of 5. Hold on, I'm trying to figure out how to advance my. Okay, there we go. John Maxwell. Here's what he says. Every day he does these 5 things. He reads, he files what he reads, he thinks about the things that he's trying to develop, he asks questions, and he writes. And I think at the time he said he's written, 50 books and sold 31 million copies. And so this has been his practice over a long period of time. These are the things he does. He has narrowed it down to realize these are part of my calling. These are part of my role. And so these are the things I do on a regular basis. So Jeff Leake's rule of 5. Here's what after that, I define mine. Okay. So these are things I have been practicing on a regular basis as well. Every day I clarify. What does that mean? It means as the leader of the organization, there's a lot of times there's things that we're trying to figure out. And so I sit down and I think through whatever's muddy about our organization, whatever needs clarity. And I actually have a document I work on every day on my laptop that is my clarity document. So a whole bunch of different problems that we've been trying to think through, I sit and I try to process to make things clearer for us. So I guess you'd say it's visioning, it's strategy, it's helping me lead us well. Second, every day I communicate. What that means is I'm preparing for some talk somewhere, right? I may not be preaching every day, but I'm preparing for whatever the next talk is, whether that's my Facebook Bible study that I do, or it's the next message that I'm going to do, or wherever I'm talking. Number 3, every day I operate in gifts. So what does that mean? It means, well, when I'm in my prayer time in the morning, I try to prompt myself to come out of that prayer time with a word for somebody. Because I feel like this is one of the power spots in my life that I'm supposed to be prophetic, functioning prophetically. So I try to make sure that I'm operating with the Holy Spirit somewhere every day. Every day I mobilize, and my schedule is full of this, helping, coaching other leaders that are trying to move somewhere. And then every day I write. And I know some of you have talked about how do you write books? And a couple of things I think I've said to several of you is that when I got involved in writing, the book coach, so I was stuck for a long time. I wanted to write a book. I started like 9 of them. I never got more than just a chapter in, and I'd read it back and I would think this just isn't what I wanted to write. So I'd start a new project. And so somebody, actually Jane and Bill Abate, hired me a book coach. They paid for this person to come in and give me several sessions. And one of the things that this person who was coaching me said is, you can't write in chapters, you have to write in chunks. Meaning that, like, what I would do is I would sit down and say, today I'm going to write chapter 1 of my book. And I could never get chapter 1 finished because it would always take longer than I thought. So if I just got a couple of sentences or paragraphs, that was enough. And that right there, like, violently moved me forward. And so it's basically the same principle. It's every day you do something. Now, let's talk about your life a little bit. And we're going to talk specifically to campus pastors now. And so if you were going to think about what you should do every day, we've determined that in your role as a CP, there are some things that are part of your role description, right? These first three, building your team, mobilizing care. So I use the word mobilize because it isn't necessarily that you have to care for everybody, that you just have to make sure that everyone is cared for and that people are participating in caring for each other. And then there is some plan every month that we're executing, right? So every month has a theme, and we're this month trying to get people to experience God. And so we're working that plan, whatever that plan is. But then there probably are a couple of slots that are open to your unique call. And knowing what those things are that you are supposed to be doing with your life may or may not be directly related to your job, but if you were to identify what those 5 things are, would become a huge factor in your ability to make a lot of progress. So my challenge would be to spend some time during Experience God Month thinking through your 5. What are the 5 most important things that you do? What's God designed you to do? What's he called you to do? And how can you start to do that on a regular basis? Okay. So now, those of you who are not campus pastors, you would probably need to sit with your supervisor and say, what are my 3 main things, right? What are the things I'm supposed to do in my organization or in our organization to make sure that I'm doing my job well? Okay. And then you need to think through other things. Now, if I could start my life over and be like some of you, 25, 27, 28 years old, and I could know my 5 and work a little bit on them every day, I would, wow, what an amazing thing that you could know what you're supposed to do and be disciplined to do them every day. Okay, that's just such a huge thing. Now, the way that I build this into my life is I am very religious with my my task lists. I use an app called Productivity, and it allows for me to, I don't know if you can see, it allows for me to have my tasks there and to prioritize them. So the app's called Productivity. It's basically a to-do list app. It's formatted in such a way, the Productivity app, that it does the same thing I just taught. You come up with your values and some goals and what works you through a process of thinking through your life, and then it helps you make it part of your daily list. And I am religious about starting my day by looking at this and then working through the day, identifying what are the key things. And the 5 things that I just went through are on my task list every day. So like I build that into my, there's a feature on here that allows for a task to be repeatable. And so I just have it repeated every day. It shows up on my task list as a top priority. And again, if it's just 5 minutes that I pay attention to it, it's enough to cross it off the list. It just has to be a part of the scheme of things. And so then, the basic thing with the task list is you create your priorities. And this is another one of these disciplines. If you can figure out what your top 5 things are, spend a little bit on them every day. And then you can prioritize what's on your plate every day and work from the top down. That's another big key to getting a lot done. So a lot of times what happens is we feel pressure about the A priorities, the things that are really important, that need to get done, that may be larger projects in nature. And the tendency is to work from the bottom up because it feels there is a rush that comes from crossing things off the list. Like you think, if I can just get some stuff done, and then what we end up is working from C priorities up, because those C priorities are fun. They're not critical, we can't typically make mistakes with those. You know, I'm going to make a couple of these phone calls. I'm going to answer a couple of these emails. I'm going to do a couple of these little minor projects, and then I'll have momentum, you know, and then I'll be able to work my way up to the 8 priorities. And then once then I'm really going to get some stuff done. And then a distraction enters, and we end up going over here and we do something that isn't on the list. And then we come back and we're like, man, now I'm all over the place. I just need a break. I'm going to get a cup of coffee, you know, and we actually never make our way back up to the top priorities. Then we pump that to the next day. And then what can happen is then it has to be done. It's the last minute. And if I don't have this done, someone's going to be mad at me. And so then we cram to get it in, and then we feel exhausted and we back off again. This is sort of rhythms of non-productivity. It's not that you aren't able to succeed in your work life functioning that way. It's just that you won't maximize yourself, right? There's a difference between succeeding in your job and being your most effective version of yourself, right? You can actually succeed in your job and not necessarily maximize your own potential. And so this is less about trying to get you to perform better for Allison Park Church. And it's more about you fulfilling your mission as a human, right? As someone called by God for what you're designed to do. So learning how to work from the top down with your task list is important too. There also is this process that we talk about, which is the discipline of triage. And this is where triage is the medical term for when people are coming in for treatment. So Melody and I, we watch Chicago Med, and, you know, they bring in the patients from some tragedy, and they say, okay, you know, we're going to treat this one first, or this one's not going to make it. So this is the process on which tasks live or die. Okay. You decide what gets immediate attention, because it's critical that it gets attention now, what's not going to get any attention, and learning how to slice things off your to-do list. Now, here's how I do that. I in my app here, when I decide to not do something, I just forward it to the next day, and that's just such a relief. You say, well, I don't want to forget this, so I just move it ahead a day, and it then helps me kind of process throughout the day what to decide not to participate with. All right, so if you don't do this, here's what happens. As a leader, the first temptation is to let the fog overtake you. So you start to get stressed out. There's too much going on, and fog settles in. And all of a sudden, there's a flurry of activity that follows, and you start to lead as a frantic leader. Now, that may be okay for your personal execution, but the people following you, when the leader gets foggy, everybody else gets even more foggy. And when you get frantic, everybody around you gets frantic. And so it's important to remain calm and focused. And so triage, prioritizing your time through a task list, and triage helps you stay focused. Second temptation is you stop communicating. When you get frantic, you don't see clearly. And so rather than leveraging your team to get more done, you're just thinking, I just got to get this over. As soon as I get this completed, then I'll lift my head up and I'll tell everybody else what they're supposed to do. And leadership can never go dark. You have to stay clear, and it has to be where everybody knows what they're doing, and where they look at you as the leader, as the pilot of the plane and the captain of the ship, and they see, we're good, we're calm, everything's going to be fine, right? And so this is a really important part of leading your team. All right. Temptation number 3 is that you just get frustrated and you slip into victimhood. You're like, this is way too hard. I don't know why we do all these events. Like, oh, this the organization is expecting way too much of me. I can't believe this. Why can't we ever take a break? And so a lot of times people, when they have mismanaged their own work life, they start to blame everything around them for the fact that, my time management and my inner life has not been disciplined. And then number 4 is that we just become a workaholic, where we just say, okay, I'm going to just do whatever it takes then. I mean, if I have to stay up all night, I'll stay up all night. If I have to work extra hours, I'll work extra hours. And again, there is a way to make sure that this doesn't happen to you. Now, in the triage process, let's go back to that now if we can. In the triage process, here is, I think, one of the most important things of being a supervisor and one of the most important things of having a supervisor. And that is this: when you feel overwhelmed, you need to use something we call the feedback loop. So you feel like, I am overwhelmed, whether you're overwhelmed because you just have too much to do, or even if you're overwhelmed because you mismanaged your time. Either way, it doesn't matter. We want to be the kind of organization that has supervisors that are able to understand that and will help you figure out what should live and die. So as a supervisor, I would love it that I would always cast such clear vision at such a healthy pace that no one would ever feel overburdened. That's not realistic. So as a leader, I know there may be some times when I push too hard or add too much to the plate and require and demand people to perform in a way that may be unhealthy. We work hard to make sure that doesn't happen. We try to make sure that people aren't out at night too often and that they're able to have time for family. We want to make that a priority, but there can be some times where maybe we just bite off too much and there's just no way to avoid that because no manager, no leader is perfect. So sometimes it happens because I may demand too much as a supervisor. Sometimes it happens that I have an employee that's trying to figure out how to manage themselves better, and they just mismanaged a moment, or they added some things that maybe they shouldn't have added. Here's what I love: when I, as a supervisor, have an employee come to me and allow me as the supervisor to decide what lives and dies. What I don't like is when it's been decided for me, when it's too late. Someone shows up and says, by the way, I'm not going to get all this done because, you asked too much or I planned too much. And now you're going to have to deal with the fact that this is just dead. That is just so difficult because then I, as the leader of the organization, have to deal with an unexpected thing that I wasn't planning for. Now, my personal style is I always have a lot more flexibility about what needs to happen than what people realize. And I'm completely comfortable with certain projects, events, dying, and like crossing them off the list. Okay, we're just not going to do that. My doesn't rise and fall with us being able to perfectly execute every event that we've ever dreamed of. So when somebody says, I have these 10 things and I can't do all 10, we can only do 8. Can you pick for me which 2 we're not going to do? I'm completely comfortable with deciding that. What I don't like is when that's decided for me, And so as a supervisor, it's just good to create that feedback loop so that together we're deciding how things should function. So the other great thing about a feedback loop is when you use it, sometimes you get an attaboy or an attagirl when you weren't expecting it. Sometimes your supervisor may say, wow, you did all that? Man, I wasn't even expecting that. You did way beyond what I thought you were going to do. So that's great. Take a little break. Why don't we not do this? And so the feedback loop where you regularly communicate with the person who's overseeing you is so important to you remaining emotionally healthy because you tend to carry pressure you were not designed to carry when there's silence. And so if you're not hearing from your supervisor, the feedback loop brings you back into communication about the specific things that are going on so that there can be agreement. And then when you're on the same page with the person who's overseeing you, then it's just so healthy. Then you feel like, okay, I know where we're going. By the way, those who campus pastors, you are being supervised and you are supervising. So you need to hear that a lot of times the people you lead are insecure about what you think about how they're doing. And they need your input about the specific tasks so that they know that they're doing the right thing in the right time. And if they aren't able to get something done, that you're helping to not just manage their task list, but to help manage their perspective. So this is a supervision is a lot managing their tasks and their direction, their execution. It's also managing their mindset and helping them to see things in the proper context so that they can get some things done. But you can imagine if all of us knew our 5, if we all knew our rule of 5 and we all were doing a little bit every day and we all were getting better at time management, and we were all using the feedback loop effectively and doing triage, we would get more done individually and collectively. That's kind of the thought. So none of this is revolutionary in terms of its concept, but it is in its practice. So if we can figure out how to do a little bit every day in those areas, I think it just is huge. Now, here's what I'll say. We're getting ready to go into summer, and summer months tends to be, we execute a little less, right? We have a little less planning going on in the summer months than we do in other months, just simply because it's summertime. Knowing your rule of 5 going into the summer may help you advance in some of the areas that are not related to Allison Park Church. But like I gave you those 3 campus pastor job descriptions that are related to your role at Allison Park Church. And then there were 2 others that potentially you could fill in, which may have to do with your own personal calling beyond your role. Those other 2 you can radically advance the ball throughout the summer months if you just pay attention to them a little bit every day. And so I think this is sort of a timely conversation to help you get focused on what will make you the most productive during the next few months together. So that's the talk. Questions, thoughts?
So Jeff, I have a question about the feedback loop. And it's maybe twofold: how you manage this as a supervisor, or even how you would recommend to manage it as somebody that's asking for feedback from their supervisor. What happens if I come to my supervisor and I say, what do I get rid of? And you tell me to get rid of something that I really want to do. Because that's a lot of times the emotional attachment. How do you lead someone through that? And what do you advise to somebody that is afraid to give something up?
Yeah. Well, normally it's not afraid. That's normally not, I'm afraid to give it up. It's more just, I refuse to give it up. So, I guess there's a couple of responses for that. One, a lot of times when people refuse, let's say you come to me, Joe, and you say, I have to choose between these 2 things. I'm not going to be able to get both of them done. What should I do? And I say, focus on priority A. And you're like, but I don't want to not do priority B. I've been planning on priority B. And I'm like, yeah, but priority A is the most important for the organization right now. And you say, is it okay if I do priority B too? So what will happen is you'll pay a personal price for that. So you can do priority B and priority A. You'll pay a personal price for that. You'll spend extra time doing it. You'll be exhausted. If you keep that practice, you're going to burn out. Eventually, then the next conversation will be, Joe will show up and I'll be like, I'm just so tired. I feel like we're doing so much. And then if I come back and I say, yeah, but you've been doing those priority Bs when I've told you not to, that's why you're tired. And you have to let go of that if you're going to live a healthy life. So I can't manage your emotions for you. I can't manage what you pay attention to and don't pay attention to. A lot of that's up to you. But sometimes the fatigue you may feel may be because you're not allowing yourself to be led. And so as a supervisor, all I can do is tell you what the priority is. But as an employee, you have to actually choose to align. And there is a freedom in letting go. I'll just say there is a freedom in letting something go. And it's also a little bit like if you're a high control person, if you're a high control person and you care about the details, it is often difficult to be led because you have an attachment to, it feels like if I don't get all this done, I have failed as a human, or somebody's going to be disappointed or whatever. But this is what a supervisor does, is they are a covering for you that provides protection from you having to be overburdened, you know? So let them be your filter, because that's part of what it's there for. I don't know if I answered that well, Joe.
No, I think that's great. That really speaks to a lot of interactions I've had on both ends of the feedback loop. Thank you.
What else? How many of you know your five? Anybody besides me know your five? No? Lorna, what are your five, Lorna?
I had to unmute myself. Well, just as you were talking, I wrote the three down: the mobilize, the care, the execute the plan, and the building team. And then as you were talking, I was just thinking about it. And the other two that I wrote in is it will turn into writing eventually, because I do have that desire. But right now for me, it's homework, because I'm in a master's degree program. So I like to pace myself with that and just, again, not be stressed at like the deadline day. And the other one that I put down is spiritual replenishment. And that could take on a variety of forms, whether it's going for a prayer walk or writing in my journal, or just, whatever that entails. So, and that's something that I need to replenish, because I'll do good with my prayer life for a while, and then it kind of like falls off the bandwagon a little bit. So just making sure, even if it's just worshiping, putting on a worship CD at home, but some kind of spiritual replenishment.
That's good. Did you go through the Maxwell training thing or no?
No. The coaching stuff that I've done is through like Pendel and then Duquesne. So I haven't done the Maxwell stuff.
Yeah.
But as you thought of it, they just kind of came and were like, this is really obvious that this is the other two that I should have. So I appreciate that focus. That's good.
So Jeff, quick question for you. So I got 4. How do we pick all 5? So, I mean, some of us already have several of them identified because they're given to us or because we know what they are. But how do you lock in the ones that you are unclear of?
Yeah. So because this is going to be the culmination or accumulation of your efforts will become the creation of your future. Picking these 5 is so important. Okay. So if you know 4, but you don't know all 5, then this is a process of discernment and discovery. You're praying about it. You're talking to other people who know you. What you want is your sweet spot. Like, okay, so writing is not essential to my job here at Allison Park Church, but it is essential to my calling, because there's something that God put in me that he wants that to become a part of the repertoire of my life, okay? So Greg, a lot of the things that are your callings have to do with your job, but there might, let me just say, maybe your 5 involves your construction crafts, because a part of your magic as a person is how you work with your hands. It provides you with great joy. It benefits the world. It's a part of a side business you're creating. It may be part of one day when you get too old to be a pastor, what you do with your life, right? And so there's nothing wrong with that being in your 5. Not everything that is on your 5 has to be related to your ministry. It should be related to your person. Now, if you have 3 of the things that are construction related, we're going to probably have a problem, because you might not be able to do your campus pastor role. But if one of them is related to something else, that's totally okay. Yeah. So Kyler, what's your reaction here? I saw you put something in the chat.
I don't know if you can hear me because my neighbor is mowing his lawn. I don't know why he's doing this at 8:30 in the morning, but yeah, this is causing me to think. What you just said is really freeing, because similar to Greg, I have discovered over the last 2 years, since we bought our house, I love building and working with my hands. In fact, if I don't have that kind of rhythm in my life, I feel like like sometimes the office life just kind of kills me. Like I need to be doing something. So I have really tried to find outlets. As Joe knows, he's about to hire me for some side things from some of his properties, but I'm just trying to find outlets. So this is really freeing to even hear you say they don't all have to be work related, but it's the accumulation of what you do now builds towards your future. So like, I'm trying to take myself out of the mindset right now of like, what are my 5 today on this Tuesday? And like 10 years from now, like, where do I want to be? And what are the 5 things that are going to help me get there? That's just really freeing to think about. So I don't have any clarity right now, but I need to sit down and think about that.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. So I just wanted to ask, like, how do you discern? Okay, so it sounds like these 5 are kind of like a long-term thing, but like the 3 of these are short-term, like job things, right? That at least that you define for campus pastors. So like how do you process through like these 5 lifelong things? Like, or do you leave like several that shift depending on your role or your season, and there are a couple that don't? Or can you really not find like your real 5 until you get into like what you would consider your long-term power spot?
I think they do shift. Probably not all 5 will shift in your life, unless your role completely changes. But I think you could have 1 or 2 that could shift over time. And how you discover them. So this is a process of getting to know you. So you being self-aware, knowing who you are, what your gifts are, what you're called to do, what other people have spoken into your life, where you find, Johannes Amitzer calls it the kiss of God on your life. There are some things that when you do them, God just kisses it because it's just so, God has just put it in you. And so when it happens, there's favor on it. There's joy in you. There's impact on the world, and there's just favor on it. Finding that kiss of the Holy Spirit is really, really important. So don't rush to pin yourself in. If you don't know 5, if you're like Greg, you only know 4, then work on those 4 until you figure out what that 5th thing is. And over time, you're in a constant process of trying to figure out, who am I? God, what is it that you want me to do with my life? What should this look like? So some things you stumble into, like Kyler is saying, I just realized I love to work with my hands and I'm good at it. And it replenishes me. That's going to be a part of mine. I know for Josh, from the time he was young, one of your 5 probably is creating music. And some of that has to do with your job. Some of that doesn't. Some of it has become a side thing that you do. It's just part of you. If you're one of your 5, like for instance, I said to Greg, it can be construction, doesn't feel all that spiritual, don't reject yourself and what you are given to just because it doesn't sound as cool or spiritual as someone else's 5. Be who you are, be the best part of who you are, and be it with joy and without apology. And so that you can just, step into that. A lot of times other people will help you with this. If you have a good, positive friend, not a negative person, but a good, positive friend who's mature, and you can say, what do you see in my life? Where's the kiss of God on me? Where do you see joy in me? Where do you see productivity? That helps, right? So it's that process. I also think it's probably maybe good, Dave, to read John Maxwell's book on this. I think he has a book called Rule of 5, if I'm not mistaken, and to hear how his brain works and laying it out. That might be a good thing. And everybody has a book allowance, I believe, as a part of their option. So if that was a book you wanted to buy for personal development, coming out of this conversation, and have the church pay for that for you, go for it. We would love for you. So you being the best version of you is maybe the most important thing you can do for the organization. Okay, so it's not just we get you to get work done. We are a collection of us and the impact of who we are together. So you being the best version of you is really important for who we are as a church. Because if you are the best you, we're gonna crush it as a church. If you're less than the best you, then we'll just be executing plans and events. So we really want you to step into who you are. Okay, I think we're probably done with this part, Joe, if you want to end the recording. And then I know you have some other stuff